Hi, and welcome to this alternative format edition of the Vininspo podcast with me, Ed Merrison. This week I caught up with Eugene Qiao from GD Vajra in Piedmont. Regular listeners will recall that I interviewed Giuseppe Vaira, second-generation vigneron of this Barolo domain, in episode 35. Beijing-born Eugene works among the vines, in the cellar and on the road for this family, having arrived in Vernier with her broken Italian as a student a decade and a half ago. As such, she brings a unique perspective on the region, its people and its wines, and to the experience of representing them in markets such as Australia. We caught up when she visited Melbourne with the 2022 Barolos. I started by asking Eugene exactly what she does at GD Vajra, how she came to be there in the first place.
So my current role or roles, so it depends on where I am. When I'm in the cellar, I'm one of the winemakers in Vajra. When I'm outside the cellar, I hold a role as Asian Pacific area manager.
How did you get to know the Vaira family in the first place?
Well, it was actually 2013 for the harvest. So I moved to Italy 2012 for university. I went to University of Turin, and then we have a very long interval between one semester to another semester. So pretty much that's exactly the time to go for harvest, or if you want to go to the lab to spend, all those time. So I choose to go to, a winery. So many wineries over there, and then I asked my professors, any suggestions, stuff like that, and then they mentioned about, well, what are you looking at? I was like, I want to actually learn as many varieties as possible. So they're like, there's a winery in Barolo called GD Vajra. They have so many varieties over there. You're gonna learn a lot, probably too many, but you're gonna like it. So I sent my CV over, and I had an interview with Aldo in May 2013, and did my harvest over there. That was a beautiful year.
Yeah, what was your first impression of Aldo then?
Very serious man, but very wise man as well. It was really enjoyable to talk to him. But at that time, I didn't really speak much Italian. He was very patient. He showed me around and also explained a few things. And I was really into flavor at that time. I think that's also kind of like connected me with the Vaira family in the first place. Yeah, that was a really good conversation I had with him. My broken Italian.
Yes, well, obviously Aldo, a fantastically academic man, literally. Did you get a sense of what it was about you that interested Aldo? Because presumably there weren't too many youngish interns in your position as curious as you, turning up with broken-ish Italian to speak about it. What was the relationship like? What was it that you think he saw in you that could be adding something to Vaira?
Well, actually, we had this conversation a few years later about it. What was his first impression on me? He actually told me he can feel the passion, obviously. He can feel the passion. And then, I think my interest over, the varieties, you can just see that writing on my face. It's just like, what is this? What is that? So that's something he saw in me the first time when he saw me. And also, we both from kind of academic background. It was really interesting because his undergraduate research paper was about lactic bacteria for the secondary fermentation. That was my graduate school program. So we both actually also related to microbiology lab. So that was also part of link us together. So that was part of the, the academic background about that.
Right. So bonding over lactic acid bacteria and other things. Not everyone's cup of tea, but obviously a very strong subject for both of you.
It's a very important part, the secondary fermentation. We're actually at different stage of that program, to be honest. In his time, that was 40 years prior to my time, they were trying to understanding more about it and get more understanding, of the local, indigenous strains of the bacteria. My generation, our research is more about the find resistant bacteria can handle, high acidity, high alcohol, grape, after the climate change. Yeah.
Yes, well, we'll delve much more into the Vaira estate and the work that you've done there and also where that passion has led you. But I want to go back a little bit because obviously you didn't grow up in Piedmont or Italy. So tell me a little bit about where you come from, where you grew up, and what kind of upbringing you had, what your interests were, I guess, as a kid, and then how you ended up moving around the world.
Well, so that's actually the boring part. So I'm a Beijing native, so I grew up in Beijing, and then my family got nothing to do with what I have to say. Well, we do like to drink nice stuff, and then I also, as a typical Asian family, actually until I was 18, I thought I must go to a medical school, become a surgeon. And then things happened. I went to study viticulture enology at that time, which led me to Italy after all.
Okay, so you ended up in Italy at what age?
I was 22.
Did you enjoy university in Turin?
Actually, a lot. Yeah, it's a great university, I have to say, like very old university. And also Turin is a beautiful city, by the way. But our faculty, especially my major, we're not in Turin at all. Like we are in Asti and Alba. So like, especially like we have a small campus in Alba. That's where I spend like most of my life with. And it's just right outside our classroom, that's a vineyard. But also like think about it, that's exactly where we should be.
Well, you say it's a boring thing. You sometimes forget that it's actually a really interesting thing, I think, for someone from Beijing to end up in the vineyards or around Asti, enjoying obviously university, but in a place where I think in Piedmont there's been a perception, certainly in parts of its history, its winemaking history and its farming history, that it's, relatively cut off. It's got its own culture. It's got its own sort of pocket of the world up there.
Of course.
And from that point of view, you were certainly not one of the regular people that you might find there. From that point of view, what kind of community did you find, accepting the Vaira family, because I suppose in some way Aldo is a particular personality who you obviously gelled with, but Piemonte, as you saw it from an outsider to begin with, what kind of community did you come across?
Oh, that's a really interesting question because, well, you see, Piemonte itself, it got a long history, already very well established. It got indigenous varieties over there, and then obviously you see indigenous winemakers, Piemontese. But like, because I stepped into the one world in Piemonte was actually through the university. So university is a place you meet other talented people, and then you learn from them, and you make friends. So like in the uni, we're actually from all over Italy. My classmates are actually all from all over Italy. A couple of us actually from Piemonte, but like Piemonte is actually a big region. So like I got classmates from Monferrato. So like also people from Langhe as well. So like even they are all from Piemonte. They're actually from very, very different kind of backgrounds. It was great to learn from every one of them. I have 5 classmates all from Sicily, and 5 of them speak like 5 different kinds of dialects. They don't understand each other. That was absolutely a wow moment, for someone like move from like, the city and get into like, a community like that. It's a very tight community when we were in the university, and I have to say I feel absolutely lucky to like step into one world with that kind of community. My uni classmate is still a very good friend of mine.
Yeah, excellent. We'll hopefully hear a bit more about them. How's your Piemontese dialect going?
Piemontese dialects actually started when I started work with the Vaira family, and then most of my colleagues, they're proper like local farmers. So they speak Piemontese to each other. And then so I actually learned from them. So like, for example, there are certain words I actually didn't really know how to say them like in Italian. For example, tamagno is like the load after a tractor.
Right.
I still actually don't know how to call it in Italian.
Like a trailer load?
A trailer load, yeah, probably called a remorchio or something in Italian. But I learned it from Piemontese words, the tamagno. Until a certain point, I was talking about, there's another tamagno's coming, and then like we have an intern from other part of Italy who was like, what did you say? Yeah, he actually didn't understand it. And then I realized, it's not an Italian word at all. It's a Piemontese word. So there are so many funny examples of that.
Yeah, and so the generation that you stepped into at GD Vaira effectively is the generation after Aldo, so the siblings Francesca, Isidoro and Giuseppe.
Yeah.
You've mentioned your peers at university who you're very good friends with. By the time you stepped into that then, in terms of Giuseppe and his siblings, would you say that there is a strong sense, looking at how other regions, I guess, operate in terms of how they travel together or share knowledge, share wines, talk about their problems, talk about their ideas.
Right.
Did you find that the community was very collaborative in this generation back in 2012, 2013, or has that changed over time?
When I arrived there, they're actually pretty collaborative already. The good community, the young producers. Then like it definitely improved. Giuseppe is a couple of years older than me. I'm similar age with Izzy and Francesca. So like imagine a lot of producers, like kids, they went to uni together, they travel together, and then so that's really good chance to learn from each other. But also like our generation will travel way more than the previous generation, so that's how you make friends. You meet people, like-minded people, but from completely different backgrounds. So like we absolutely got a privilege from that point on view confronting to the previous generation. So yeah, that eventually led up like our generation way more different from like the previous one.
Yeah, and do you think that that naturally means that because you're traveling more, that you are also perhaps taking lessons from other wines from other regions, maybe drinking more broadly or using more reference points around the world than perhaps the previous generation in Piedmont when looking at winemaking, wine growing, and the challenges you face?
I think we definitely do, and also like imagine like the way our generation grew up with the internet, so that's absolutely great way, you know, to make friends, talk to people. You talk to like winemakers all over the world, but also like now, you know, if you look at during the harvest time, like it's like a United Nations over there. You got talented winemakers from all over the world actually in Barolo, and they put their hands on Nebbiolo, on Freisa, on Barbera, and we can learn something from them, that how they deal with certain, you know, like challenging situations. Yeah, that was absolutely great time. The previous generation obviously didn't really have the chance to travel as we do, but also we're facing a very different, you know, stage, you know, of the world economy as well.
From the point of view of Piedmont as a place, I'm sure some people listening have been there and know what it's all about to travel there and how joyous it is to experience Piedmont and its landscapes and its culture. What's your perception as someone who obviously feels very at home there and has done a lot of work, a lot of harvests there over time? It's home from home for you. But what's lovely about Piedmont, its people, its culture, its food, all that sort of stuff, is someone who has the, I suppose, privilege of being an outsider but an insider too?
Is definitely, like in short words, great part of the world. It's pretty much got everything. Well, I mean, the winter is cold, and also like in the mountainside, so there are always like a bit like people making joke about, you know, Piemontese, about like they're montagnais, the mountain people, they're like a bit close-minded. I mean, yes and no. They're actually very generous people. They're very generous people, a bit sheltered, but if you open your heart with them and then like take a bit of time to understand who they really are, you're gonna find they're very generous people. And also most important part was like because where they're from, they are very hardworking people. Very hardworking people. I mean, depends on which part of Piedmont we're talking about, but like especially if you just talk about Langhe, it used to be really poor region not long ago. So my classmates' parents, so like we're talking about people in their 60s, they still remember like in the 80s, even in the early 90s, it was like not, region was not as, you know, flourished, not as fancy, you know, as what it is today. And it was incredible to hear like, you know, all the stories, like how, you know, the region was back in days. People, you know, like they're counting every liter of water, or like, you know, like to collect the you know the salt on the bacala, and then to collect those salt to cook pasta, things like that, to try to save every single cent they can. So like they're from very humble like background. They're very hardworking people. You still can tell that from even the modern day, you know, the Langhe producers that stay with them.
What do you think about the cuisine?
The cuisine, I have to say, like it is definitely something like I really agree with the cuisine. That's how like I can survive more than 10 years over there, because I'm not really much a cheese person, unfortunately. Lactose, and then the pasta and the mushrooms and stuff like that, you basically can just survive stuff on that. And also like the Piemontese cuisine is extremely humble. They still cook a lot of off parts out of that, you know, from their humble beginning, a lot of like, you know, like tribes and stuff like that, so they make every single part of the animal into like delicious dishes. So that's also part of the root of the Piemontese history. But also at the same time, if you look at local varieties like dolcetto, for example, it's a very humble variety, but it works with what? Every single kind of food. Like if you got a finanziera, the awful stew, that works really well with dolcetto. So really humble food, really humble wine. So that's what Piemontese was actually about.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question, and maybe you just answered it. If you had a favorite traditional food and wine pairing from Piedmont?
Well, nobody says no to the tagliatelle con tartufo bianco with a glass of Barolo, okay?
Yep.
No one says no about that, okay? But apart from that, I like carne cruda because Piemonte's got a fantastic breed called Fassona. You don't find it anywhere else. It's like very lean like meat, but not dry. So the Fassona carne cruda was definitely like every time when I go home, I need to have like half kilo of that to bring myself back to life again. And then with dolcetto, okay, we're back to dolcetto again. Yeah. So it was a very interesting thing. I remember once, this is actually something like I had a conversation with Milena, so Aldo's wife. She was telling me like how important, dolcetto to the locals and stuff like that. And then one day she was like, what, you liked carne cruda, right? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, carne cruda actually was the best pairing with like the dolcetto. That's interesting. And then we realized was like, you do carne cruda at the end of the day, you still got a lot of fat, so you do need tanning. And then but you don't want the acidity too high to bring the bloody taste out of that. So dolcetto just fit in perfect.
Very nice. And what about Chinese food, which I don't think many people would immediately assume with Piemontese pairings, but do you have any nice synergies you found? I mean, you're lucky, I suppose, in a way to work with a fantastic Riesling producer. Which is, I suppose, a bit of a gimme. But is there any secret that you can unlock on that front with Asian cuisine and Piemontese wines?
Well, you have no idea how many times we actually make dumplings. We make jiaozi, with my friends. So jiaozi actually is a good example. It really depends what kind of feeling you have inside. You can pair with whatever kind of wine out of that. Fraise is absolutely a wow to me. For like Chinese cuisine, there are a lot of soy sauce, oyster sauce, like heavy sauce over there. And in certain part of the country, they like the braised meat, or like for example hong shao rou, that one was with sugar, with like different kind of soy sauce in the base sauce. That plus pork belly. That's a heavy dish. That's a nice dish. That's a very heavy dish. You do need tanning. You need some wine with a big structure to deal with it. And then Fraser actually step into that scenario perfectly.
Very good. Well, I'd like to speak about Fraser or the other varieties that interested you. So, because obviously Giuseppe Vaira is putting a lot of work into heirloom varieties as well. Yeah. So you've managed to really follow that passion even further down the line. But we'll stay on a couple of more traditional things first. And I just wanted to get your take on Barbera, both in the vineyard at Vajra and also those things that you like about that wine and how versatile that can be.
Barbera, I have to say Barbera is actually the first variety to get me into the Piemonte wine world. And now if we look back to that, it's like it's just right time and the right place. I have to say I was not really a big fan, of the style of Nebbiolo or Dolcetto. Imagine, it smells pretty, but like it got tannin behind it. But Barbera just like, oh, wow, it smells pretty, it tastes pretty. And like the acidity and the tannin just sit there like perfectly. So like I was absolutely one of the people, get recruited into the Piemontese world by Barbera. But also like it's a very interesting, you see like the style of Barbera actually change from region to region, because as Vajra we are in Langhe, so we have the Barbera di Alba, so it's clearly different from the style of Barbera di Asti or the Nizza especially. So those are like much heavier, like bigger structure over there. And in Langhe, a lot of time you do see like Barbera standing still, and then probably with minimum oak over there, because we have 2 Barbera, the classic Barbera, with 6 different blended vineyards from 3 comune. I mean, it's not easy one to make, the different terroir over there. But at the end of the day, it's all about the juiciness, the prettiness of the Barbera, the drinkability of that variety. And then the Barbera Superiore, obviously, you do see the other side of Barbera. It could be extremely serious and, and even aging worse out of that. In Vajra, their approach to the Barbera variety was that it's absolutely one of our favorite varieties to work with. And also, we feel really privileged actually got a chance to see the different side of Barbera as a grape itself. I mean, we used to have the Bricco delle Viole, Barbera vineyard. I had the privilege I could work with that vineyard for a couple of years before, we put it out. That was a vineyard planted in 1949 by Carlo, so Aldo's nonno. So you see that kind of 60 plus 70 years old Barbera vineyards, the character, the generosity, they actually showed up over there. You feel like, wow, what a world, what a world. So we're pretty lucky to see through, a different side of Barbera grape.
Very good. And onto Nebbiolo. Obviously, it's a grape beloved of many Australia and around the world. What generalizations do you think hold true for the Nebbiolo variety, and what do you think its particular charms are for you?
It's a very versatile variety, and it's expressive, probably one of the most expressive red variety in the world as well. If you think about it, Nebbiolo grape can do pretty much everything, from Metodo Classico sparkling, rosé, a light white, classic long Nebbiolo, that kind of Nebbiolo di Alba, and then to Barolo Barbaresco. And then for some other colleagues, a different terroir like Valtellina, Alto Piemonte, it's just so expressive, the variety, but also it works well with every single style of wine in the end of the day. So that was something I think a lot of people didn't realize about Nebbiolo, because when we talk about Nebbiolo, most of the time we're talking about Barolo Barbaresco. And in recent years, thanks to some of our colleagues, they're more Alto Piemonte and Valtellina actually step into the whole spectrum. But it's just such a versatile variety. But obviously, I think there was another part was a lot of us, we didn't really get the chance to taste the Metodo Classico Nebbiolo sparkling wine. But if you have a sip of that, you're like, oh yeah, totally, that's a point. And then the Rosato Nebbiolo, or the light color, for example, Clary JC, the Chiaretto we make is more about the fruitiness of a Nebbiolo variety as well. Imagine that's a variety. A lot of time we work with the tanning because, thick skin, beautiful structure of tanning. But at the end of the day, it's a very fruity and high acidity variety. You can do a lot to that spectrum.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Clary JC, which is quite an interesting wine. Original in a way, but one that, as is quite typical, when Giuseppe was on the podcast, he was talking about the incredible library of old books that he likes to sift through how things were done in the old days. And of course, it was inspired by something that was actually a very ancient technique. Mm-hmm. You've probably shown that wine all over the world to lots of different markets, the Clary JC. How do people receive that wine?
We found is quite an interesting phenomenon because there are a lot of, Nebbiolo fanatics. They really into Nebbiolo history, and when they taste the JC, that's how Nebbiolo, tastes like 400 years ago. They're quite emotional. But for a lot of time, for a lot of drinkers, they don't know much about Nebbiolo. They probably heard about Nebbiolo, and then when they taste the JC, this is pretty. So you don't need to know the wine that much. You don't need to know the variety that much. The first of all, it's a very catchy wine. It's a very attractive wine, and then happens, a lot of time you in the tasting, you always got one or two friends, they're not in the wine world, but they know what they like. And so it happened to me quite a lot of time, they just, some wine drinkers, they bring their not one drinker friends over, but then it tastes just, what is that? Tell me more about that. And then that was also the moment it reminds us why we make wine. We make something delicious to drink, and after years and years and years, to dig as deep as possible to see like the terroir of Barolo and how expressive Nebbiolo is. We forgot about it. It's also such a friendly variety through. So the JC actually just bring us back to that stage of, just simply enjoyment about tasting wine.
Yes, it's funny as well hearing you say that about Nebbiolo's versatility, because for a long time, I think even in Australia, there have been people who have been saying that Nebbiolo can't work anywhere else but Piemonte, and it's something that you seem to disagree with very strongly. And also, I know that you're very interested in Australian Nebbiolo.
Yeah,
you went on a road trip up to Beechworth where you hooked up with Patrick Underwood, Pete from Domenica, Tess Brown, I think, from Vignerons Schmotzer and Brown. So cool field trip, and it must be really cool to have the Australian guys so pumped about this variety, but also there are wines to absolutely love, no?
Yeah, so I've been to Beechworth twice now. I actually back to Beechworth this year at the end of the harvest. It's beautiful to see, some of the ferments actually, and colleagues and friends over there, they're so generous to show everything around, how things work. So it answered a lot of questions, to be honest. It was also amazing, to see how Nebbiolo work very well outside the northwest part of Italy. Yeah. I mean, like, it took a lot of time. A lot of effort, Like, it's not an easy grape to grow. It's not an easy variety to make into wine. But at the end of the day, as we were saying, like, how versatile and how expressive this variety is, it should work somewhere else very well.
Yeah.
And to express the local terroir.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're falling into a bit of a trap talking about Australian Nebbiolo is one thing, where already we're seeing that those who have been doing it for a while, and it does take a while to get your head around it, clearly, but they're in lots of different places making an Australian Nebbiolo that is very much more a wine of site or region, and that's really quite exciting.
Yeah. I mean, like, one thing, for example, like Steve.
Panel?
Yeah. Steve might, he's a Protero, like Nebbiolo was like, that's absolutely great example how to express a local terroir. He got great experience back in Barolo with Aldo back in days, but when he came back home, it's all about to make a local Nebbiolo, not a Langhe Nebbiolo Barolo, something like that. Yeah. It was, I think that's just great mentality.
Yeah, and a lovely rosato as well. You're over here at the moment to talk about the 2022 Barolo wines from Giuseppe Vaira that weren't launched all that long ago.
Yeah.
We've got the Albe, the Costi di Rosse, the Brico delle Viole, and the Ravera out at the moment. Just very quickly, if you would, just give me your sense of what those wines are in terms of their characters. Obviously, Albe being the outlier because it's a blended wine, but a very, very successful one and a very popular one year in, year out. And then the three different vineyards. Just briefly, what's the character of those wines for you?
Well, actually you can see those characters pretty well in the 2022 vintage, which is we found is like absolutely a miracle year from viticulture point of view for how hard that vintage was, but what came out from that vintage was beautiful. So obviously, like, Albe got different mission confronting to the other single vineyard Barolo. Albe is all about to represent the terroir of like where we are from the higher part of Barolo. That's also where all those three vineyards come from, Fossati, Cosivegna, and La Volta. The vintage itself is about the, the territorio, where we are. And when we come into, Costi Rose, it's still quite a vineyard, quite new to us, because 2015 was the first vintage. We're still learning a lot. So, like, for example, 2021 was turning point. We started to do much longer skin contact on that vineyard. We realized, it's like, actually, we don't need to worry about over-extract the tannin as long as we handle well, still keep the prettiness, the pristine, like aroma of that wine. So it was very energetic, like Barolo, sandy vineyard, you do feel the minerality out of that, and the medium palate. So like, a bit sheepish to say that, but yes, it is a bit Pinot-ish. It is a Pinot-ish, like, because this is feedback from some of friends of mine, they're Pinot drinkers, obviously, and now they step into the Barolo world, and when it has Costa Rose, they're like, oh yeah, that's pretty, like, it's just smoothly bring them into the Nebbiolo world. And then La Vera is a good example of, like, like Barolo terroir is actually quite interesting. Giuseppe explain about, the messed up like tiramisu. Like we're dealing with, like the terroir from 5 million years, and at the same place on the same surface. La Vera is actually a good example. It's actually a melting pot. Barolo terroir is actually the collection between sandy part from lower part of Barolo, the clay part from higher part of Barolo, which where we are, Brico Violet, and then the red clay from Monforte di Alba, because we have the really south part of the La Vella vineyard, so it's like very close to like Monforte. It's got quite a bit of influence out of that. The muscle and the spicy note actually from La Vera, actually just a great example of what kind of mixtape what we're handling in that little tiny piece of like land. And the Brico, obviously, well, it's all about elegancy. But still, after all those years, I still think Brico del Vio is one of the best examples about how elegant a Barolo could be. High elevation vineyards, one of the highest in the Barolo region, and some of the oldest vineyards we're holding from 1930s and 1940s. So that privilege to work that vineyard and to see like one of the latest harvest vineyard as well. So they give time. You need some patience, obviously, to let the grape ripe, to not let all the details accumulate after all. So eventually they ended up something like extremely elegant with all those delicate details behind it. It's I just really like the metaphor of the ballet dancer with Brico del Violet. Probably one of the most elegant things to think about it, but obviously with a lot of muscle.
Yeah.
And then integrated perfectly together.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it throws up the elegance of the presentation and the shape and the structure of that wine, but it also has a very strong, subtle signatures that are repeated year after year, Brico della Viole, which is so interesting. It has that. They're all delicate things, but within a wine of such presence. And I think your description of La Vera actually is spot on. It is what makes that wine for me very, very interesting as well.
Did you realize the proper Barolo La Vera was 2010? There was a short period of time in early 80s when Aldo just hold that vineyard. He made, very shortly single vineyard Barolo out of that, but then he decided to leave it and study it a bit more. And 2010 was a relaunching of the single vineyard. Took him almost 30 years to understand the terroir of La Vera, and confidently to make a single vineyard Barolo out of that.
That's very interesting. Well, that should give, again, our Australian winemakers heart that they might have to go back to the drawing board if something's too tricky, and it'll come out good in the end. But no, that's very interesting. That just goes to show how interestingly diverse the terroir is, but also how Nebbiolo needs to be understood, and it takes a lot to get there. We talked a little bit earlier about your interest in other varieties as well, and this is something that Vajra is really interesting on as well, because you had, obviously, as we said, the books and the library of knowledge and the academic side of Aldo, which is clearly being handed down to Giuseppe and the next generation. But with Slarina, Chateau's, Nascetta, other varieties, you're really dialing into some lovely other details, aren't you? Tell me a little bit about those different grapes and what it means to you to be still looking to the past but innovating for the future.
Well, I think that's something we're really lucky to work with indigenous varieties, especially in Italy, because we have so many indigenous varieties over there. Then a lot of them, obviously, as we know, got a bit lost in the past 30 years due to different reasons, but there's always a chance to bring them back. And also if you think about one of the primary reasons why there are a lot of more, this kind of trials all around was because of the climate change. We have so many choices over there. Those are indigenous variety in our land, and we can see how they actually respond to the climate change. They're not necessarily to introduce another variety, from other part of the world. You just see how the indigenous varieties respond to that, because some of those varieties probably not ripe enough, back in days, but now we're facing a completely different reality. So that's absolutely a great part of our work now. So the vineyard team, so led by Isidoro, he got a huge passion actually over the varieties. So actually beside Aldo, Izzy actually helped me a lot from a very early stage to understand the local terroir and the local varieties. I actually learned a lot from him. And now he's like the vineyard, especially Fagliano vineyard, his playground with indigenous varieties, all the conservation programs going on. So very exciting. I mean, not only red variety, we actually got quite a few white over there. So that blended in the Montelustico Bianco, for example, Rossese Bianco. That's the indigenous white variety in Rodino, like Bienverde, mountain grape, Baladushat. That's from other side of Piemonte. And yeah, we also have a trial of Manzoni Bianco in our land.
Yeah, fantastically interesting. And speaking about climate change, I mean, we're always aware of the climate itself being dramatic, really, in Piemonte. The position with the Alpine influences, with the Mediterranean not that far away, this sort of meeting of fronts, I suppose, in that really interesting corner of the world. But weather itself is also causing a bit of havoc. We've seen just this last week at the end of a massive heat wave, a lot of really bad hail affecting people. I saw some dreadful footage in parts of Germany and in the Loire Valley.
Yeah, heartbreaking
stuff. And you know, it's something that's really on your mind in Piemonte. I mean, obviously the viticulture, or the way that you respond to challenges and have to be very nimble, is really important. What else are you kind of doing to make yourselves feel at least as comfortable as you can be with the idea that you have to react?
Comfortable as you can be. I think it's actually part of like the farmer's nature. I mean, Barolo is a wine region. Obviously, it's some of the most beautiful wine in the world, but at the end of the day, we're in the agriculture section. So that's the root of everyone. So at the end of the day, we're all farmers. So like you have to like respond to the weather. You have to respond to all the change and to make a living out of that. So like I think it's a part of the mentality over there. But obviously, some of the region more conservative, some of the region they're more like progressive. Come from like our New World colleagues. they're pretty open-minded to try different things, see what works, because they're not traditional something over there to follow. But Piemonte, if you really think about it, it's a region like kind of in the past 40-50 years always on the way to adapt the changes, no matter in like the viticulture perspective or like the style of the wine. So like at the moment it's more about the viticulture, I would say, like to adapt to this kind of extreme weather. It's very hard to put this word into my mouth, but that's what we're facing. And obviously that leads to the change of the style of the wine as well. But if you really think about it, this kind of hot and dry vintages, I was not there, but I also heard about it in the early 2000s, a couple of them. But if you look at the style of the wine back in days, they're very dark, like big body wine. If you got some like very early 2000 Barolo, you still can have a glance of like how local farmers respond to the year like that. But then through the history in the past 20-ish years, it just only getting hotter and drier. But if you look at the style of the wine, actually it is starting to change to the direction of the more elegant and the bright and easier to drink. But the year is getting hotter and getting drier. So how would it end up into that direction? So obviously, if you look back, there's a lot of adaptations in the vineyard and a lot of adaptation in the winemaking process. Yeah, it's a great way evolution you actually see through in the past years, especially between 2017 to 2022. 17 was hard. That was a hard year, and then 20 was even warmer and drier. But we're actually ready to deal with it. Hopefully, never deal with another winter like that again. But when it comes, we're ready to deal with that. A lot of hard work.
Yeah, a lot of hard work. I mean, as you say, I always hear you talk about the old timers and how you're amazed by their sixth sense for the weather and the climate in Piemonte, but also with all the learning that you've taken from them, but all the observations, I guess, at Giuseppe Vaira, the fact that Aldo is scientific and artistic, but very observant and thoughtful. And I suppose being constantly thoughtful, constantly adaptive is really, really important. And organised too. I mean, just really being organised in your work, I suppose, is not a very sexy word, but it's very, very important.
It's absolutely important.
To be able to be able to respond.
Yeah.
And sensibly. We're running out of time, so I just want to ask you one more question, and that is, I love the fact that you and Giuseppe and the Vaira family, you bring your open-mindedness when you come to Australia. You love tasting wines here and finding out what's going on. I just wanted to end on any tips that you have about Australian wine at the moment, anything you tasted together, or any particular style or grape variety in a certain region that you think the world needs to know more about this stuff?
Well, I think Chardonnay is one of those. And also Aussie Chardonnay, especially the Yarra Valley Chardonnays, has been getting huge reputation in recent years. But we actually see there's a giant leap, of the, the quality and also the expression of the terroir, actually, of the Chardonnay. Quite a few great bottles, actually. And especially, some of the traditional regions is getting a bit less accessible. And then obviously we always have our mind on a Nebbiolo. So every time when we got a chance, we try to bring, a Nebbiolo from the rest of the world back home, to have our colleagues to taste, to have adult to taste. That's a really educational experience for us. But also in Nebbiolo, I have to say, I had some really beautiful bottles, in the past 12 months, and I met actually a lot of great people, great producers of Nebbiolo. Just really looking forward to see how you're gonna evolve.
And last question: selling beautiful Piemonte wine in Australia and showing people those wines, is that fun?
A lot of fun, yeah. I really enjoy it, and also you'd be surprised how many like-minded people you're gonna meet through the journey.
That's it for this alt-format edition of the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share it everywhere. Your support makes it possible to keep putting out original, thoughtful work like this. You can also subscribe to my Substack, that's edmerison.substack.com. Shout out to GD Vaira's Australian importer, Cellahan, for facilitating this, and my thanks also to Lucas James for the music, Neil Williams for the artwork, and to my guest, Eugene Qiao. Till next time, live wine to the fullest. Cheers!